Welcome to Nissan, a little bit late, but here. Having technical problems. Oh, wait, I think we might be coming up. Hold on.
Okay, so welcome back everybody to Women Teaching Torah on Rosh Chodesh. This has been going on for several years now, which is fantastic. I'll say this again at the end, but just off the top, we have a speaker set up for next month, Shoshana Halfenbaum for Rosh Chodesh ER. But if anyone is interested in any month after that, they are all fair game. So please send me an email at mrjbparker@gmail.com. It's in all the shul's flyers if you would like to run one of these in the future. So I'll go over Shayna's bio now very slowly, and then maybe her Zoom will be up and running at that point. So Shayna is a product of Winnipeg's modern Orthodox day school and high school, followed by Stern College for Women and the University of Manitoba. She has been a lawyer and a medical journalist, and for the past couple of decades, a teacher. The common denominator for all of those, she is a compulsive explainer. She's taught in the US and Canada for programs including the Korot, the YU Women's Beit Midrash, and the Florence Milton Adult Mini School program, and at shuls of every denominational stripe. Since moving to Shari Shemaim's catchment area in 1982, she has given many Divrei Torah here in the downstairs Minyan, at Suda Shlishi, in the formal Shiurim, and she was also among the women who began the Women's Megillah reading and the Women's Simchat Torah programs, both of which started in the 90s and have really become hallmarks of what Shari Shemaim brings to the community. They also teaches private groups on any topic of Jewish interest they care to learn. Her motto, just ask me. By way of diversion, Shayna reads and writes poetry and does crosswords. And Shayna, are we good to go?
I think we are.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to mute myself and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I ask anyone who's not immediately about to ask a question to mute themselves as well, so we don't have overlapping sound? If you haven't muted yourself, please do so. And since we're not that big a group, if you want to ask me a question, wave or use the little automatic wave. Let me see if I can find it here. Your machine may have it in a different place, but there is a little thing that lets you raise a hand. See, I've raised my hand. I'm going to lower it now. Okay. So please feel free to intervene and stop me if I say something you don't understand or that you're wondering about. Okay, my next task is going to be to try to share my screen. Oh, you need to enable me to allow me to share my screen so I can post my materials.
You should be good to go now.
Okay, excellent. All right, so just 1 second here. Let me go back and find the actual materials in question. Okay. There they are. Okay. Okay, do people see the source sheet? Are you seeing a source sheet? Excellent. Okay, so first of all, thank you for joining me. As it happens, tonight is actually the yortzeit for my mother, Aleh Shalom, Rebbetzin Shosha Alta, Bas Dovber, and Frima. And so I hope that our learning together will be Le'ilui Nishmata, for the benefit of her soul. And of course, it's also at the same time part of the ongoing Devar Torah program that Jonathan referred to, which Baruch Hashem has been going on now for decades, yay, which is very exciting. Okay, so as you can see from the top line, we're going to look at 4 topics. We're going to look at denial, cover-up, atonement, and redemption. And next to that are the mystic 3 letters in Hebrew, Kaf Pei Resh. Okay, a root with mighty strength in Jewish philosophy. And so I'm going to start with Inyana Diyoma, the current issues. I'm going to start with something from the Pesach Haggadah. I'm sure you will recognize this passage. Rasha Mahu Omer, the wicked son, what does he say? Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. What is this service to you? And this is a quote from Shmot, chapter 12, which of course is famously the chapter in Parshat Bo, where Moshe basically sets everything up and warns Bnei Israel that the wheels are turning and that redemption is at hand, and they need to be prepared. And so in the course of discussion in Shmot, Moshe looks forward to the future generations, and he imagines that one generation will ask the previous one, Ma ha'avodah hazot, what is this service for you? Okay, so in the context of the Chumash, it seems to be an innocent quote, but the Haggadah does something very different. It says, Lachem ve'lo lo, to you and not to him. Ulefi shehotzi et atzmo min haklal kafar be'ikar. And since he, the wicked son, took himself out from the general community of Israel, Klal Yisrael, kafar ba'ikar, and I have translated kafar there as denied. He has denied the essential principle. The af atahak shinav, and even so, you should even blunt his teeth. The emor lo, and say to him. And here we have another quote, also from Parshat Bo. Ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim. Thus did God, on this account, did God do for me in my going out from Egypt. Li velo lo, me, but not him. Ilu hayasham lo hayanigal. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. He would not have been taken out, right? So what is this phrase, kafar ba'ikar? Clearly we recognize the root, yes. And it's a phrase that appears in a number of different places. For example, it appears in the context of Nezikin in Baba Vatra, I think, where they're talking about loans, and one who denies the loan, denies a pre-existing loan, is said kafar b'malveh, that he denies the lender. Okay, so we have this sense that kafar has to do with denial. Okay, and I brought you a couple of references that connect to that. One is the Avudraham in his commentary on the Haggadah, Zesh, referring to this very section, Zesh kafar ba'ikar harehu bichlal ben nechar. Since he denied the essential principle, he is considered within the grouping, within the community of those who are not born Jewish, let's say aliens. Lo yachol bo, he's not allowed to eat from the Pesach Korban. V'shinav tikena, and his teeth are blunted. That goes back to the very strange metaphor that's used in the Haggadah itself, where it says blunt his teeth. What does that mean? So here's Avudraham telling us, Shinav tikahena, his teeth will be blunted. Shero'eh le'acheri machlim v'hu eino ochel, because he sees that others are eating and he himself is not eating. So what is it that he has been kofer? What exactly has he denied? What is the principle that he has denied? It's not easy to see from the discussion here, right? It's clearly has to do with some sense of his participation in Klal Yisrael, right? That he has excluded himself from the overall existence and destiny of Klal Yisrael. He says, it's for you, it's not for me. And so you do what you want. I am not a participant. Okay, and the Pesach Haggadah says, the voice of the Haggadah says to him, as it were, you're not participating in the rescue. You're not participating in the burdens. You're not participating in the benefits, right? No roast lamb for you. Okay. All right, so that seems to be a relatively minor principle. I mean, the principle that he's denying is a big one, but the outcome seems to be very minor, right? That he can't eat the Pesach the Pesach Korban, because we know, for example, there were many people who could not eat the Pesach Korban for various reasons. We have the whole story in the Torah where it talks about the creation of Pesach Shayna, one of those great moments in Sefer Bamidbar, where a group come up to Moshe and say, here's our problem. We were not able to celebrate Pesach because we were Tameh at the time, for whatever reason. Maybe there was a death, maybe we had an encounter with something that was Tameh and we weren't able to be Mitaher, right? But in any case, we couldn't celebrate Pesach in its appropriate time on the 14th of Nisan. So what shall we do? And Moshe has a word with God. Being Moshe, he gets to do that. And God tells him, all right, they get a do-over a month later, okay? So clearly, the idea of being excluded from the participation in the Korban, it's serious, but nobody's dying, okay? But take a look at the next reference that I found for you. This is from Baba Vatra, and here it's talking about Yaakov and Esav. And you may recall that Esav, within the four margins of the page of the Torah, doesn't seem to be such a terrible person. There are lots of explanations for why he does the things that he does. And so people struggle with the fact that he is clearly cast as the villain. So the Midrash comes along and provides us with a number of explanations about why he's the villain based on extra-textual understandings. And here is one of them. This is referring to the day upon which Esav and Yaakov, Esav comes in thirsty and starving from the field, and he says to Yaakov, give me some of that lentil soup. And Yaakov says, sure, only if you give me the Bechor, right? Only if you give me the birthright. Give me your entitlement as the elder son. And Esav says, sure, take it. What do I care, right? And here's the Talmud Bavli. Rav Yochanan is giving us the background of about what was really happening that day. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chamesh Averot Avar Oto Rasha Be'oto Hayom. 5 transgressions did that wicked man, and he's meaning Esav in context, transgress on that day. And what day was it? It was the day when Avram died. Okay, so their grandfather has died. Why is Yaakov cooking lentil soup? Because lentil soup is a traditional food for a mourner, because the lentils are round, they have no opening, right? So they represent the muteness of the mourner, right? There's a bit of analogy to the same thing we see with an egg as a food for a mourner. Okay, so Yaakov is cooking the food of a mourning family, M-O-U-R-N, mourning family. Esav comes back from the field on this tragic day, and he's so hungry and thirsty, he's willing to throw away, as we might say, his birthright. So what else did he do on that day? Be'oto hayom, on that same day, ba'al na'ara me'urasa, he raped a betrothed girl. Harag et hanefesh, he killed someone. The kafar ba'ikar, and he denied, here we are with that phrase again, the essential principle. The kafar b'tchiyat hametim. Notice that this is a different idea, right? He denied the principle of the resurrection of the dead. Vishat et habechorah, and despised the birthright. Okay, so when we look at those 5 averot that Esav is alleged to have committed on that terrible day when Avram died, right? It's hard to understand how they line up, right? And why they are in the order that they're given, right? Ba'al na'ara me'urasa, he rapes a woman, that's terrible, of course. The haraget hanefesh, he kills someone. All of these are going to be capital crimes, right? The kafar ba'ikar, here we are again, back to the Rasha, right? The wicked son. He denied the essential principle. The kafar b'tchiyat hametim, and he denied the principle of the resurrection of the dead. And those of you who know Maimonides' discussion of those who have a chelek in the world to come, He specifically says someone who denies the resurrection of the dead is someone who does not have a chelek in the world to come. And finally, Vishat et ha-bechorah, he despised the birthright. And again, if you look at the commentaries on that in the context, in the encounter on the day, you'll see that the commentaries talk about that when he threw away his birthright, what he was essentially saying is there's no world to come. It doesn't matter to me. The only thing that exists is this world, this moment, here, now, my existence as a sensual being experiencing the physical world, and everything else is just silliness, craziness, has nothing to do with me. Okay? But so we have a couple of instances here where we have the idea of kafar ba'ikar is the act of excluding yourself from the community, right? Saying to yourself, you're not part of something larger. Okay, as it were, breaking off from something. Okay, so that's the first one, that's denial. Okay, our next concept is the cover-up. Okay, by the way, if you're thinking that this sounds vaguely reminiscent of a certain political era, you are indeed correct. That was in my mind. Okay, all right. And what is the connection between kaf peresh and covering up? It's the kaporet. Right? The kaporet is the cover that fits over the Ark of the Covenant. It was made of gold and it had extensions that were drawn into what became the, what's the word I want? The sockets through which poles could be run to carry the aron, because of course no one could touch it. Okay, so we have this idea of a kaporet. Okay, the asita kaporet, that's the quote in Shmot chapter 25, and here comes Ibn Ezra to explain to us what that means. Okay, the kaporet is a word that appears many times, but its meaning is not always clear in context. But here is Ibn Ezra explaining kidmut mechaseh, in the likeness of a cover. Right, it's something that fit on top of the ark. Okay, the Amar Yefet, and he quotes someone named Yefet, ki kamohu lichaper alav. It is similar to the expression lichaper alav. Ah, this is one we know, right? This is again inyana diyoma, in the sense that we just finished reading that parsha, right? This is Parshat Vayikra, where we have the first idea of the use of korbanot as being michaper, which I will here translate as to atone. Okay, so you have the moment in chapter 1 of Vayikra, I will say the startling moment, where you have, and I'm just going to read it from my Tanakh here. Okay, excuse me. Right, God calls to Moshe and starts to inform him about how the korbanot work. Okay, and in verse 4 he says, "V'samach yado al rosh ha'olah." The person puts his hands upon the rising offering. V'nir tzar lo, it will be accepted for him. Lichaper alav, to atone for him. Okay, and this is what we would think of, I think, as the classical meaning of lichaper, right? The idea of atonement. This is where we have this is the most common usage that we would think of. If I were, for example, to give you that root without any context, the first thing you would think of, I think, is kapara, Yom Kippurim, all of those ideas, okay? All right, so back to Ibn Ezra. Okay, he quotes that verse from the opening in Vayikra, and he says, this is like the covering, kisui, of sin, okay? All right, so that's one idea. The idea of michaper is to cover over. And covering something is kind of a neutral gesture. If you're covering, you can be covering something bad or you can be covering something good, right? To hide something good is not generally seen as a good thing. To hide something bad may be a good thing, right? We ask God, as it were, to hide our sins, right? You know, before the throne that has no forgetfulness, we say, but wait a minute, can't you just let this one slide by, right? God, as it were, for a moment, puts on the mantle of humanity and says, you know, I can't remember. I know they did something, but it's slipping my mind now, right? So God, as it were, covers over our sin, okay? All right, coming back to Ibn Ezra. But in my opinion, the phrase l'chaper alav is from the root kofer. Okay, now kofer is a little different, right? Kofer means to redeem. Okay, and here it is made explicit that each person shall give a redemption kofer for his soul. That's in Shemot chapter 30, and this should be fresh in your mind also. What is this from, I ask homiletically? It is from one of the 4 Shabbatot surrounding Purim and Pesach. It's from Parshat Shkalim, right? And what is the shekel supposed to do? It acts as a redemption, a kofer, for each person who contributes it. And it then goes on in the Parshat Shkalim to atone lichaper al nafshotechem, for your souls. Now, what is it that is so terrible about the process of Shkalim, about the process of counting, which is essentially what's happening in Shkalim, right? Why is it so terrible that we need to atone for it, right? And if you'll recall, first of all, there are a number of places where we see that counting Israel is a problem, right? We count Israel by proxy. Anyone who's ever been in shul waiting for a minyan knows Hoshia et amecha uvarech et nachlatecha urim v'nasem ad olam. 10 words, right? So you count the 10 words, you don't count the 10 people. I think it's David who runs into problems when he counts the nation. And even in the Torah, there are moments when God is counting Israel at various times. On the one hand, he seems to count Israel a lot, right? There's a lot of counting, right? You know, the other name for Sefer Bamidbar is Sefer Pikudim, the book of counting, right? The book of accounts. And so there's this sense in which I think Rashi at one point says that God keeps counting the Israelites because he loves them so much. I always think this in the analogy to a parent who looks at their child and just counts all the little fingers and toes, just for the sheer delight of counting the fingers and toes, right? You know there are 10 of them. You know there will be 10 of them, but still it's such a delight to count the 10. Okay, so that's part of it. This idea of that God is, that Israel is chaviv to God, okay? But the other thing is the idea of that when you count, you break up a group, okay? And you individualize people, and you, at the same time as you are making them uniform, right? They become units, right? And this is problematic. This is seen as a reduction of the Tselem Elokim that each of us represents, right? So that when we count someone, in one sense, you are taking them out of the klal, right? You're breaking up the klal into individual units. And on the other hand, you're making them uniform. You're ceasing to see them as a unique individual emanation of Hashem in an earthly form. And so counting people is problematic. And that is why in the description of the Machatzit HaShekel, it talks about Natnu ish kofer nafsho. Each person will give a redemption, a kofer for his soul, for himself, right? The idea being that each person is, as it were, offering the token amount. And remember, it's a uniform amount. It doesn't matter how rich or how poor you are. Everybody, excuse me, everybody brings the same machatzit hashekel. But the point is that when they count up all of the machatziot hashekalim, what they're going to have is the equivalent of the number of people who contributed to the Beit HaMikdash, to Mishkan at that stage, but eventually to the Beit HaMikdash, without having to, as it were, demean them by counting them, okay? So here we have the idea of kofer being a means of rescue, right? And for those of you who know, who do kaporot, right? Notice the root again. Okay, if you do kaporot on the morning before, the morning of Erev Yom Kippur, you know that there's a passage that is taken from Eov, and I'm sorry to say I forgot to include it in my text list, but here it is. Okay, this is from Eov, chapter Lamed, Perek Lamed Gimel, and it is Pasuk Okay, it starts really at, okay, I'll start at Pasuk Kaf Gimel, okay? Im yesh alav malach melitz echad mini aleph l'hagid le'adam yashro, and that should ring a bell, that particular phrase. It's quite unusual, and we find it in Yom Kippur, okay? Part of the davening on Yom Kippur. If there is a single messenger or angel who is prepared from among 1,000, who is prepared to defend him, to speak well of him, and to speak justice for this person. Vayechunenu, this is verse 24, Pasuk Chaf Dalet. Vayechunenu, he will be granted grace. Vayomer, and it will be said, Pida'ehu meredet shachet, redeem him from going down into the depths, into destruction. Matzati kofer, I have found redemption. Okay, so here in Eov, we have this idea that associates kofer, meaning redemption, also with the idea of atoning for mistakes, in the sense of redeeming someone in both the monetary, so to speak, and in the psychological and emotional sense, right? Okay. And then the last place I want to take you to is someplace that I was very surprised to find, especially because I must have read it 1,000 times, as I'm sure you have also. Okay. And it's a passage in Breshit. In Perek Lamed Bet of Breshit, you have the terrifying moment when Yaakov is waiting to meet up again with Esav. And Esav is mighty in the land, wealthy, and the last time Esav and Yaakov saw each other, they were at daggers drawn. Okay, it's been a long time. They've both prospered, and now Esav and Yaakov are going to meet up again. And Yaakov, this is Parshat Vayishlach, Perek Lamed Bet. Yaakov starts by sending messengers, and of course, another day, another time, we'll have this whole discussion about whether the Malachim are earthly messengers or whether he has angels with wings at his disposal. But at the moment, the parsha begins with Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim Levanav El Esav Achiv, right? Yaakov sends messengers before him to Esav, his brother, Artza Seir, to the land of Seir, Sdei Edom, in the field of Edom. And then there's a whole long discussion of what the instructions he gives to them about how he's going to, how many animals they're going to take and how they're going to present them to Esav as essentially a kind of propitiation, appeasement, words like that, right? Okay. And if we scoot down a little further, okay, still in Perek Lamed Bet, you get to Pasuk Yud Zayin. He's instructing his servants about how to handle the flocks when they come up to meet Esav. And here he is in Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vayetzavet harishon lemor, and he told the first slave, the servant, to saying, Ki yifgashcha Esav achi, if Esav my brother meets you, ushe'elcha lemor, and asks you, saying, Limi ata va'ana telech, who do you belong to and where are you going? Ulimi ela lifanecha, and to what are these that go, and to whom are these that go before you, meaning the animals? The amarta la'avdecha, and say to your servant, the amarta, and say, la'avdecha le'Yaakov mincha hi shlucha la'arani la'esav, and say, for your servant, for Yaakov, this is an offering. A grain offering is usually what it means, but mincha, if you look at the root, it comes from Noach, which means a rest. So this is a peace offering. Okay, this is to settle things between them. Mincha hi shlucha, it's a mincha that is sent le'adoni le'esav, to my lord Esav, v'hine gam hu acharenu, and see, he is also behind us. Okay, and Yaakov then goes on to give similar instructions to his second servant with the second set of animals. And then in Pasuk Chaf Perek Lamed Bet, you get V'amartem gam hinei avdecha Yaakov acharenu. And you also will say, here is your servant Yaakov behind us. Ki amar, for he said, meaning Yaakov said, as it were, to himself, achapra panav b'mincha haholechet lefanai. I will be mechaper his face. Notice the root. I will be mechaper his face with this mincha, this settling offering, haholechet lefanai, that goes before me. Va'acharechen er'a panav. After that, I will see his face. Ula yisa panai. Perhaps he will lift my face. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but I must have read that many, many, many times. It never leapt out at me that that was the root achapra. That kippur there, or that kafar there, did not leap out at me. Okay. Fortunately, Rashi is here to help us. Okay. Achapra panav. Okay. Okay. I've translated that as I will appease him, taking it as a kind of idiomatic expression. Okay. Okay. And then Rashi goes on to say, avatel radzo. I will set aside, avatel, his fury. V'chein v'chupar britchem et mavet. And similarly, the expression, and your covenant with death will be annulled, that appears in Yeshayahu, right? And there the word for annulled is kupar, right? And it seems in my eyes, Rashi continues, that every kapare that is near words of iniquity and sin, and near the word for temper, panim, right? The idea of panim is an expression of temperament, okay? They are all expressions of wiping away and removing, okay? That this idea of kapara has to do, on the one hand, it has to do with hiding or covering over. And on the other hand, it also has to do with wiping away or removing, okay? Rashi goes on to say, okay, gam vilashon aramihu, this is an Aramaic expression, the harbe b'Talmud, and he gives a couple of examples from the Talmud, which I am grateful to Sefaria, because believe you me, I would never have found where those were from, okay? In each case, the word in Aramaic is chaper, and it's interpreted as to wipe off, right? Chaper yedei, he wiped off his hand, and ba'e lechapure yedei bahahu gavra. He wanted to wipe his hand off on that man. And in each case, what that's referring to is the idea of transferring responsibility, saying it's not my fault, it's that guy's, right? You're, as it were, wiping your dust off onto someone else. Someone else is your towel, so to speak, okay? Right? And also in the biblical text, v'gam bilshon hamikra, nikraim hamizrakim shel Chodesh, the bowls that were used for sacred purposes are called kiforei zahav. This is in the first chapter of Ezra. Kiforei zahav, again, look at the root, right? Kaf peresh. Al shem shehakohen mikaneach yadav bahen bisfat hamizrak, because the kohen sort of shoves the dirt, not the dirt, but the substances off his hands when he's engaged in bringing a korban. He shoves it off against the rim of the bowl, okay? So the idea of kafar here is essentially wiping off or clearing away, okay? So this is a really interesting, to me, this is a really interesting sort of combination of choices here. This one set of roots has all of these different possibilities, right? It has denial, right? Kafar be'ikar. It has cover up, the kaporet. It has atonement. That's the primary use that we're used to. And it also has the idea of redemption, kofer, right? That's, as Eov says, matzati kofer. I have found a redeemer. I have found something that will redeem me. So what is happening here? In a way, all of this takes me back to something that we say every morning. Nishama shenatata bi tohorahi, right? The soul that you've placed within me is tahor. So what is that about? It means that our natural state is to be tahor, and to be something else is to be, I want to use deviant in a non-judgmental way, is to be divergent. That's a better word, okay? Our natural state is to be tahor. And when we diverge from that, right? The question is, how do we resume our previous existence? How do we come back to our natural existence as tahor, as connected with God, right? We begin our lives and our existence engaged with God. And for those of you who put on tefillin, of course, you know that explicitly, right? Ve'erasticha, right? Every morning when you put on tefillin shel yad, you proclaim that, taking the passage from Hosea, right? So we are engaged to God, we are engaged with God. That's our natural state. And when we deviate from that, there has to be some mechanism to repair, right? There has to be some mechanism to bring us back into joinder, bring us back into community, make us connected again, to smooth over, to cover over the disjuncture, okay? And that is what that root kafar has in all of its various places, right? This idea of reconnecting, this idea that our natural state is to be connected, to be at one with God, and we have all of these mechanisms that are available to us that allow us to find our way back if something happens to disjoint, that's not the word I want, to cause us to diverge from that natural connectedness. Okay, it's at its acme on Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonement, right? Right, Yom Kippur. That's the big day, and I've referenced to you, as you've heard, various passages that connect to that idea, right? The idea of Yom Kippurim. That's, so to speak, the obvious one, the easy one. That's the one that we all grew up with. But these subtler ones, these more hidden ones, right? The idea of the Machatzit HaShekel as kofer, right? The idea that to find a good deed to act as your melitz yosher, right? To act as your advocate for justice is again a way of reconnecting with God. Okay, that also is an act of kapara as well as an act of kofer, right? So this one little root has all of these branches that enter into all of these places in the calendar, right? Machatzit HaShekel, which we read running up to Pesach. Kafar B'ikar, which we find in the Haggadah, right? Yom Kippurim. The Kaporet, which of course is crucial everywhere when we think about the Ohel Moed and afterwards the Mishkan, and after that the Beit HaMikdash, right? All of these ideas of of kafar as being about connecting with God. And if you remember at the opening of Parshat Achrei Mot, which is again a very tragic moment, right? Aaron has lost his children, his two eldest sons, and Moshe now has to give him instructions about how to connect with God again, right? And so we have again this idea of returning to God, okay? Connect with God again, and yet to do it in a way that will not endanger him in the same way that his children terribly were endangered. And so what does Moshe say? He says you have to approach up to the kaporet, right? You can't go directly in. You have to watch for the anan. You have to watch for the cloud above the kaporet, right? Because the kaporet, again, is the place of kapara. It's the place of connecting again. It's the place of finding your way back to God again, back to your natural state as being connected to God. So here is Aharon in the deepest, most tragic moment of anyone's life, to lose a child, God forbid, okay? But here he is, his own brother is telling him, you have to find your way back. And the way you find your way back is with the kaporet, with the act of kapara, with finding a kofer. Okay, I'm talked out. What about you guys? Questions, comments? Hello, are you still awake? Now is the time to unmute. That's it, really? Nothing? Okay.
Oh, no, I mean, I think this was really fascinating. I really like your deep dive into the way this shoresh is used, like throughout the Jewish liturgy, right? So not just in Torah, but into commentaries and into the Haggadah. I don't know, it's so counterintuitive to me to think about the the shoresh, implying that this is how we draw the Rasha back closer, right? Like kafar be'ikar, to me, it's just this statement of he's too far gone. It's irreparable. But I really like the way you understand the structure of the language to mean, no, that's not what it means at all. It means there is redemption possible, and this is how you do it. I think that's fast. My mom would appreciate that. She hates that we're so down on the Rasha, so she will certainly appreciate that.
Well, I'm actually pro Esav myself, despite having read what it says in the Midrash about him, because when you look at him in the Torah, I have to say there's only one moment that is genuinely chilling, and that is the moment when he says, "The days for mourning of my father draw near, and then I'll kill my brother." That's a dark moment. But other than that, most of what he does seems to me very human and comprehensible. And the problem was that he had, so to speak, the bad luck to be not Esav as Esav, but Esav as the counterpoint to Yaakov. So, any other comments or questions? Okay, so in that case, I'm going to wish everyone a Freilich and kosher Pesach. Remember, dust is not chametz. Okay, and so you don't have to take the books off the shelves. And have a wonderful Pesach, kosher and Freilich, and I hope to see you, God willing, at Shul, and also at the next Women's Dvar Torah.
Thank you so much, Shayna. And beyond.
Thanks, Shayna.
Thank you, Shayna. Yasher koach.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
That was beautiful,
Thank you.
Shayna. Thank you.
I'm so glad you came. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And
Thank
have a wonderful Pesach.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
You too. Thank you,
Okay.
Shayna.